In part one, we discussed some valuable statistics on rice. We got a good nutritional base on what kind of carbohydrate it is. A starchy carbohydrate. We went over the kinds of starch, the positives, the negatives, and we answered one major question. Was it considered a high starch food? We also covered the Japanese paradox. They eat rice at every meal. They have the longest life expectancy and the lowest obesity rates in the world. Today, I will tell you why that is. We will also cover, is starch bad for you? We will also look into other healthy starch foods and non-starchy vegetables. Second, we will compare and contrast the major sources of starchy carbs we do eat. And then you'll be presented with 4 very simple practical applications of how to fit these into your diet to not only control blood sugars, but that will leverage weight loss, body fat loss, and muscle gain in the future. So if you're looking for advice on how to feel and look your all-time best, then this is why you're going to want to hit those notification buttons and subscribe to this channel. That little gray bell in the corner, you're going to want to hit that. You'll also want to know when the next episode has been released. And if you like what you've heard today, I'm going to want you to hit that like button. I do need you to share this with other diabetics or those looking to stay fit, because today's advice is for everyone. So there are 2 main categories of vegetables: starchy and non-starchy. In part 1, we discussed starchy types. What are they? Rice, potatoes, pasta, corn, beans. A small list, we'll get in more detail later, of the non-starchy types include broccoli, tomatoes, and zucchini. Now, our mom's been saying from day one, eat your vegetables. It's good for you. Moms know best. That's why I have them in every meal. These non-starchy vegetables are the nutritious ones. They are rich in fiber, vitamins, and minerals. They're the ones that offer the protection against the chronic illnesses, the diabetes, the obesity, and the heart disease. Why? Because they are loaded with the antioxidants, such as vitamin C and E. These are the compounds that help protect cells from the harmful damage known as free radicals. We've discussed that. And oxidative stress. They are more important to our health than the starchy counterparts. Okay. Very generally speaking here, cooked starch vegetables such as potatoes pack in around that's about 15 grams of carbs, roughly around 80 to 120 calories per half a cup. Okay? Whereas the non-starchy types like artichokes, asparagus, bean sprouts, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, spinach, tomatoes, turnips, zucchini, they all contain about 5 grams of carbs, or about 25 calories, in an equal portion. So starchy carbs, starchy vegetables pack in around 3 to 4 more times the amount of carbs than the non-starchy. For this reason, if you're like me and you have diabetes, or just one looking to trim down, you have to seriously consider limiting your starchy vegetables. And I'll explain how and why coming up. Now, because these non-starchy vegetables also tend to be naturally low in sugar, fat, and sodium, you can eat relatively large quantities. So sometimes you're going to see this perfect plate of dinner, and it shows this large piece of rice, some protein, and then a couple sprigs of asparagus or broccoli heads. Folks, those are the most powerful foods that we can eat. So it actually should be backwards. These powerful non-starchy vegetables should consist the largest part of that plate. So let's start to compare and contrast the major sources of starchy carbs eaten around the world. We'll start with white rice, long grain, cooked. Half a cup. This is half a cup. And you're going to need to know what half a cup looks like on a plate. because that's your starting point. If you don't know what half a cup looks like, then you quite won't know the calorie relations between each one. So that's important. So half a cup, 4 ounces of white rice, 120 calories. One potato, small potato, it's the flesh and the skin, baked, is 130 calories. Half a cup is roughly around 100, to put it in context. Now, one walking at 3 miles per hour would need about 55 minutes of exercise to burn off 1 cup of potatoes, because that's the serving size most have. That's right. Half a cup of cooked pasta is about 110 calories. That's not bad. However, who eats half a cup of pasta? You're also going to want to put some sauce on top, and that's where more substantial sugars come from. So another half a cup of marinara sauce, or spaghetti sauce, with no cheese, adds in another 100 calories. And I don't know anyone that eats half a cup. So let's have fun. Let's compare rice, potatoes, pasta to that evil, evil soda. So a 12-ounce can of soda will contain about 140 calories. Did I just say half a cup of white rice has 120 calories? So they have roughly the same amount of sugars. If we are to compare apples to apples, that half a cup of soda is actually roughly around 50 calories. So half a cup of soda has less sugar than that half cup of rice. And this is kind of where we're going to start tying in all the videos. In my episode, Do Fruit Juices and Smoothies Kill?, we went over how the body digests and absorbs carbohydrates. What did I say? By the time that carbohydrate is absorbed into the small intestine, it is completely broken down into that simple sugar unit. The body doesn't know where that glucose came from. A healthy starchy carb, a can of soda, juice, popcorn, bread, it doesn't matter. It gets absorbed as glucose. So to repeat this important point, it doesn't matter where it came from. It is the total load or the amounts at any given time. In other words, how much insulin will be needed to bring blood sugars down, and what is the body going to do with the excess? Where does it store it? In subcutaneous fat under the skin, or even worse, in between organs as fat droplets inside the muscle, or as truncal fat, which is abdominal fat around the stomach. This becomes the body's main concern and problem, especially when it comes in surplus. Now, however, soda does contain high fructose corn syrup. And you learned from the episode on fruit juices, high fructose corn syrup is a little over 50%. Do you remember the name of the sugar? Fructose. And is metabolized by which organ? The liver. Yes, you're correct. So whereas starchy vegetables, like rice, comprise of what? It's only glucose. There's no fructose in there. So now, how do we put all this information into practical use for both sugar control, thus changing body composition? Less fat, more muscle. Now, on a side note, one of my biggest contributions will be my discussions on how to unwind and get rid of that unwanted fat that's built up inside the muscles, in between those organs and around the abdominal region. You're going to want to stay tuned for that. But first, we still have to cover a lot of basics. That will come later. Now, getting back to the equation, how do we tie all this together? There are 2 key words that I want you to closely look at: accompaniments and portion. First, if you notice in the Japanese paradox, rice is generally the sole source of carbohydrate at each meal. There are non-starchy vegetable accompaniments, soups, a protein source, but there are no breads or flour-based products concurrently served. We, depending on the culture, will always have some sort of bread, a pita, a tortilla, chapati, naan, along with the rice. And furthermore, there'll be some kind of fat put on that bread. Butter. The Japanese staple is plain white rice, fish, pickled vegetables, and green tea. Second, here's the key. Their portion sizes are smaller. Japanese food portions are traditionally very tiny. In the Asian culture, including mine, you're told to finish and clean off your plate. So in Japan, people do not want to waste food. So their portion sizes are smaller. But what is not discussed that we have to pull into the equation is the Japanese are traditionally a much smaller stature, so their requirements will be less. That rice becomes incredibly filling. Now, here in the US, we tend to pile our food onto one big plate. So it feels like we've got this really plentiful meal ahead of us. Whereas in Japan, it's the opposite. The Japanese serve their food in, if you haven't noticed, small, separate plates, and then arrange those dishes in a way that's pleasing to the eye. The satisfaction one gets from the meal is from how it looks, not just how much you can eat. So they move slowly from dish to dish, kind of eating mindfully and then pacing themselves. They tend to follow another rule. Eat until you're 80% full. So, as I mentioned, the Japanese eat plain white rice. What are some of the quick mistakes we make? Well, you go to a restaurant and you order rice. It's never plain white rice. At a very, very popular Mexican fast food restaurant, that half a cup of rice jumps to about 170 calories, but it contains 600 milligrams of salt. White rice, in its original form, contains no salt, no sodium. If one is ordering risotto, just understand that rice is cooked slowly in broth, then mixed with cheese, cream, butter, vegetables, meat, or seafood. It all by itself can be a main dish, but more often than not, it's a side dish. A first course for a bigger meal. Then there's pasta, sugar, bread, sugar. You catching my point? So now on to the practical applications. Number one, if you're going to eat rice, eat plain white rice. Simple. 2, choose one source of starchy carbohydrate at any given meal. A great example is the burrito. That burrito has tortilla, starch, beans, starch, rice, starch. In other words, sugar, sugar, and more sugar. Getting it? Third, replace starchy carbs with outsized portions of non-starchy vegetables. Load up on those deep colored vegetables, but you need to limit the oils and fats used to cook those vegetables. Fourth, I do what the Japanese do too. I always have an accompanied piece of lean protein along with each meal. Baked chicken breast, lean cuts of beef, turkey, fish. Those are my staples. They are eaten at every meal. Folks, those are the practical applications, and they work. I again thank you for spending some time with me today. My goal, obviously, with each episode is to help you learn something new and to help bring some meaning and change into your life. If you'd like to know more about my story, my educational background, I'll make things as simple as possible. Go down below to my description box and I will create a link directly for that. So if you found those tips helpful, you know what I need you to do. Those alerts, the gray bell, the subscribe button. And if you like what you heard today, click that like button. I'll keep repeating this. It is super, super important for us new channels. The more you hit those alerts, the more YouTube promotes us, the channel, the more people get to see and learn. That's why I'll continually ask. In the comment section below, feel free to tell me what you've learned and how you plan on incorporating those ideas into your life. Love to hear from you. So, have a great day, a productive week, and we will see you soon.